Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today we are taking a really deep dive into Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's absolute masterpiece. We're looking specifically at the source text, Kishkna Shahzada, which of course translates to The Little Prince. Now, I know what you might be thinking. On the surface, it kind of just looks like a simple, whimsical children's book, right? But we're not just reading a story today. We're going to treat this text like a profound philosophical mirror. Over the next few minutes, we're going to explore how this brilliant little book literally forces us to look at our own lives, our deepest values, and honestly, the essential things we've somehow forgotten as we've grown older.
Okay, so to really set the stage for this journey of rediscovery, we've got to start right here, with arguably the single most famous piece of philosophy from the entire book. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. I mean, really think about that for a second. We spend our entire days, our whole lives really, just obsessing over the tangible stuff, the measurable things we can physically see and hold. But Saint-Exupéry is right out of the gate challenging us to look past all of that. He's essentially telling us that the most real things in the entire universe, stuff like love, genuine friendship, loyalty, deep meaning, you can't quantify them on a spreadsheet. There's no metric for them. They literally have to be felt.
All right, let's get into part one, the desert meeting. So, picture this. We begin the narrative with an adult pilot who is completely stranded in the middle of the unforgiving Sahara Desert. I mean, we're talking a literal life-or-death situation here. He's incredibly stressed, desperately trying to fix his plane's engine before his water runs out, when out of absolutely nowhere, this strange, insightful, and frankly pretty demanding little kid just casually walks up to him and asks him to draw a sheep. It completely bypasses all adult logic. The pilot is sweating over life and death, and this prince is intensely focused on a doodle. It's this brilliant, jarring clash of two completely different realities.
Now, what happens next is so crucial. The pilot, trying to humor him, attempts to draw a sheep, but the prince rejects every single attempt. It's too sick, it's too old, it has horns, you name it. Finally, out of sheer absolute frustration, so he can just get back to his engine, the pilot draws a simple box with 3 little holes in it. He tells the prince, "Look, the sheep you asked for is inside this box." And to the pilot's complete shock, the kid's face just lights up. You see, the pilot only manages to connect with the prince when he stops trying to draw literal sheep and instead taps back into his own lost childhood imagination. It shows us beautifully that true understanding actually begins the exact moment we let go of our rigid, literal expectations. Moving right along to part 2, the absurdity of adults. Before arriving on Earth, the prince did a bit of planet hopping across the universe. And through his stories, we get this profound, almost comical look at his sheer bewilderment at the behavior of the grown-ups he meets out there. Just look at some of these bizarre characters. On the left, you've got the vain man's planet. This is a guy who literally only has ears for praise. He desperately seeks empty admiration from anyone who happens to visit. Then on the right, you've got the king's planet. He's a ruler in this incredibly impressive, majestic cloak, but he has absolutely 0 subjects to actually rule over. These characters are totally brilliant parodies of our own adult traits. You know, our obsession with authority, our desperate need for outside validation, and how these weird obsessions actually just end up isolating us on our own lonely little islands. And that whole idea brings us to this incredibly poignant moment with the businessman. The prince meets this guy who literally spends all of his time just counting the stars. He counts exactly 501 million. Wait, let me get the exact number. Yeah, 501,622,731 stars. And why is he doing this? Because he claims he owns them. He just catalogs them, writes the giant number down on a tiny piece of paper, and locks it in a drawer. It's a hilarious yet kind of deeply tragic showcase of the absolute absurdity of adult greed, wanting to aggressively possess the beauty of the universe without ever stopping for a single second to actually enjoy it. So as we see here, grown-ups value figures, what they so seriously call matters of consequence, and hard facts like geography. The little prince, on the other hand, values the sheer experience of watching sunsets, the delicate care of a single flower, and the deep bond of friendship. And I kind of want to directly challenge you right now. Take a quick, honest look at your own life. Do you find yourself prioritizing these so-called matters of consequence, like checking your bank account, worrying about your job title, or climbing the status ladder, way over genuine beauty and human connection? It's a really tough question, I know, but it's exactly what this text is practically begging us to ask ourselves.
Okay, let's dive into part 3, the secret of the fox.
When the prince finally does land on Earth, he ends up meeting the fox. And guys, this leads to what is arguably the story's most crucial and beautiful philosophical turning point. The prince asks the fox to come and play with him because, well, he's incredibly lonely. but the fox refuses. He plainly explains that he cannot play with the prince because he is not yet tamed. Now, this introduces a completely brand new concept to our young traveler, and frankly, it introduces a pretty vital concept to us as well.
And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute core message of the source material. You see, taming here doesn't mean domesticating a wild animal, like putting a leash on a dog. It means to establish ties. It's the active, intentional act of dedicating your time, your patience, and your vulnerability to make someone or something entirely unique in all the world. The text is telling us, screaming at us really, that meaning isn't just randomly stumbled upon on the wild. It is actively created through mutual effort.
The fox actually takes the time to walk the prince through the specific, deeply patient steps required to build this kind of bond. First, you sit at a slight distance. Then you say absolutely nothing, because as the fox wisely notes, words are often the source of massive misunderstandings. Then you sit a little closer every single day. You observe consistent rituals. Just take a second to contrast this very deliberate, careful relationship building with the incredibly fast-paced, highly transactional world of the grown-ups we were just talking about. The fox is teaching the prince that real, authentic connection, it takes time, it takes presence, and it takes ritual.
Which perfectly sets up Part 4, the prince's unique rose.
Armed with the fox's incredible wisdom, the prince's entire perspective fundamentally shifts. He finally, truly understands the complicated and, honestly, somewhat frustrating relationship he left behind on his tiny home planet. See, when the prince first arrived on Earth, he stumbled upon a garden with thousands of roses, and he was totally heartbroken. He thought his rose back home was the only one in the entire universe. But then, he has this massive realization. He looks at those thousands of Earth roses and realizes they are completely empty to him. His rose back home is entirely unique, not because of its genetics, but simply because it is the one he took the time to water. It's the one he carefully put under a glass globe to protect from the wind. It's the one he sat and listened to when she complained or even when she boasted.
I absolutely love this line. Notice how the word wasted is used here. It is the time you have wasted for your rose that makes your rose so important. It's used totally ironically, because think about it. In the eyes of that businessman or any of the other grown-ups, just staring at a flower and caring for it is a literal waste of time because it doesn't generate a profit or give you power. But the fox and now the prince, they know the real truth. They know that time spent in love, care, and total attention is actually the only time that is truly well spent.
And finally, Part 5, Seeing with the Heart.
We're bringing our journey to a close here as the prince prepares to finally leave Earth. And he is certainly no longer the naive traveler who first fell from the sky. He is fully armed with a completely transformed understanding of life, love, and what it means to connect. Now, the concluding pages of the book carry this immense, palpable, emotional weight. The prince's departure is deeply, deeply sad for the pilot, but the narrative carefully frames it not as a tragic final end, but as a necessary, almost beautiful step. The prince essentially has to leave his heavy physical body behind so he can travel back to the stars, reunite with his beloved Rose, and actually fulfill his responsibilities to her.
And that brings us to the ultimate gut punch of a lesson he leaves with the pilot and, of course, with us. You become responsible, forever, for what you have tamed. The ties we establish in this life, they're not casual, they're not throwaway things. They come with a heavy, yet incredibly beautiful burden. When you truly give your heart to someone, when you spend your precious time taming them and allowing them to tame you, you hold a lifelong responsibility to that bond. Forever.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Have you let your own inner grown-up blind you to the invisible, essential things in your own life? Have you been way too busy counting the stars like the businessman to actually step back and see them shine? I challenge you, really challenge you, to look up at the night sky tonight with the fresh, wide-open eyes of a child and take a quiet moment to ponder what, or who, is your own unique rose. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey today, and as always, keep learning.